Welcome to Unit 6, Ancient Rome, from City to Empire. In this new video, we are going to see sections 5 and 6. Section 5 is going to be about religion and culture in ancient Rome, and section 6 is going to be about Roman art, mostly dedicated to Roman architecture. Section 5, religion and culture in ancient Rome. How was Roman religion, Roman gods, and Roman worship? Basically, we have to focus on Roman as polytheistic religion in constant change and super important, super present in Roman life, even Roman politics and Roman armies. The basis of Roman religion is the incorporation of practices of conquered people, such as the Etruscans and the Greeks, for example, the famous Greek Dodecatheon, the 12 Olympic gods, but not only that, but also the heroes are incorporated into Roman pantheon. Heracles, the famous Greek hero, is turned into Hercules. That is the name in which we mostly know. Among other things, for example, there is the transformation of some gods, but mostly having the same sort of characteristics. In addition to that, for example, we have from other conquered peoples, such as Diana, the Babylonian goddess of hunting, is incorporated, Isis, the Egyptian goddess of fertility, or Mithras, the Persian god of light, which is the one we have in the picture. In addition to that, there is another goddess that is called Kulebeya in the native land of Phrygia in the Anatolian Peninsula, that is turned into Cybele in ancient Greece and is converted into Magna Mater in ancient Rome, the mother of all the gods. Why is this relevant? Mostly because in Madrid we have a fountain that is very special for dedicated to this goddess. In addition to that, there is also the imperial cult. That is, some emperors were considered divine, as we have already seen in section 3 about the Roman Empire, and they were worshipped. That was considered as a symbol of the loyalty of Rome. In the pictures, what we have is a sculpture of Augustus, the first Roman emperor, that was considered divine, and in the picture on the left, a temple dedicated to Julius Caesar that was also made divine. There is also 5.2, a new religion that appears in the 1st century AD at the beginning of the empire in the Middle East, in the area of Palestine, of Judea, modern-day Israel. This religion was based on following the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth, and the main ideas of this religion is rigid monotheism, and therefore the first Christians were prosecuted for rejecting the imperial cult, and the ideas of love, forgiveness, equality, and eternal afterlife. That made possible the expansion of this religion for the first centuries of the empire, even though with certain difficulties. Again, these persecutions for not worshipping the emperor and considered treason. And by the time of Constantine, they had expanded throughout most of the empire. In the 4th century AD, as we saw in the section of the empire, there is the Edict of Milan in 313, proclaimed by Constantine I the Great, which declared freedom of worship in the empire. We have to remember that Constantine was the first emperor that was baptized, even though in his deathbed in Roman history. And in 380, Theodosius I the Great proclaimed the Edict of Thessalonica, in which Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire. Among other consequences, we see how Christianity and the Catholic Church assumes loads of influences from Roman symbology and ideas. I would recommend you to watch Christianity from Judaism to Constantine, Crash Course World History 11 with our good old friend John Green, in which you are going to see some ideas about the appearance of Christianity in the Roman Empire and its spread throughout it. Roman culture. We have to base ourselves on some ideas. We are going to go very basic on this. The language of the Roman Empire was Latin, as we have already seen and we already know. That was spoken throughout the empire, all over the empire, and was the vehicle of culture in addition to trading, to military action, etc., etc. Latin, for example, has been very influential because here we have a map in which where Latin languages, Romance languages, are still official. We have some areas of Europe, but also in Africa and in the Americas because of the colonization of these areas. In addition to language, we have already mentioned the importance of legislation, that is the laws. Roman law is the base for the modern legal systems, and also the Julian calendar, which is a calendar divided into 365 days, divided in 12 months, with a leap year every 4 years, that is this 29th of February. And we also have to take into account the existence of the months of July and August, which make direct reference to Julius Caesar and Augustus. In addition to that, in other fields of knowledge, we have the figures of Seneca and Cicero in philosophy, Virgil and his Aeneid in literature, Galen in medicine, and in our discipline, that is history, we have the presence of Julius Caesar, yes, dictator and consul, that one, Tacitus and Plutarch. Section number 3 of this unit is dedicated to Roman art, as we have already seen. We are going to focus mostly on architecture, but we are also going to study sculpture, painting, and mosaic. Roman architecture is based on the following ideas. They were great builders. We have to take that into account. Even we have loads of Roman standing buildings still today, and they are a mixture of architecture and engineering. What is the difference of, what do we consider the difference between architecture and engineering? Engineering is solving a problem, is being practical, and architecture is making nice buildings, nice internal spaces. What is the main objective of Roman architecture? Making practical and functional structures. That is, the function is more important than the looks, than the aesthetics, even though they didn't undermine the aesthetics. They made very large buildings that were considered a symbol of power. And if we compare with Egyptian architecture or Greek architecture, there is the importance of the internal spaces more than the external spaces. That is, the buildings, even though it sounds like a silly idea, they were thought for being used in the inside, not just in the outside. The main materials used in Roman architecture are stone, bricks, wood, mortar, and concrete. In this picture we have bricks. Mortar is this mixture between the bricks, and here we have a stone. In this case we have opus cementitium, the concrete hormigón that was used, for example, in the Pantheon, as we are going to see. The constructive elements, we have semicircular arches, like this one here in the center, that is a semicircle for covering an space. The projection of a semicircle in 3 dimensions is a barrel vault, and then we have a dome, which is spinning a semicircular arch, as we are going to see when we start speaking about the architectonical works. Other constructive elements are the columns. They use Greek orders, Ionic, Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian, and they make also composite columns in which they mixture Ionic and Corinthian columns, as we can see here in the bottom right of the image. For decorating the buildings, as we have already seen, this importance of the internal spaces, they use paintings on the walls and mosaics on the floor. The different building typologies, there are going to be many of them, and we are going to start by studying religious architecture. Religious architecture, always temples, which can be rectangular or circular with large Greek influence. Here we have in this slide, we have an image of the Parthenon in Athens and the Maison Carrée in Nîmes, which is a Roman temple. Greek temples, if you recall from Unit 5, Greek architecture was based on human reference, the human proportion. They were rectangular peripteral, that is surrounded completely by columns, and they were on a platform that was accessible on all 4 sides. Roman temples, as we can see in the image, on the other hand, they have very large size. They don't keep the proportions that much. They want to show power again. They are pseudo-peripteral, that is, even though they are surrounded by columns, you cannot really, it's not full columns, but semi-columns, only accessible through the front part, and the temples are not on a platform, but on a podium. It's just a slight difference. If you have these 3 characteristics into account, you are going to be perfectly able to distinguish a Greek temple and a Roman temple. The examples of temples, for example, here we have the reconstruction of the Temple of Caesar that we have seen before. In Rome are in the Temple of Concord, also in Rome, that looks pretty much like our Congreso de los Diputados. Also, we have examples such as the Templo Romano de Vic in the province of Barcelona in Spain, and the Temple of Bacchus in Baalbek, Lebanon, which is one of the most important examples of Roman temples. The Maison Carrée, that is the one we have seen. I want you to pay attention to the size of the building. That is, here we have through the main access some person going up, and it's the total height of the podium is about 2 times the size of that person, which can be about 3.5 meters. Now it's time for the Pantheon. Its dome still dominates the skyline of Rome today. Probably the most important and influential Roman building, and one of the most important temples ever built in history. This magnificent building was built in the 2nd century AD by Emperor Hadrian, even though Agrippa is the name in the frieze. Pantheon means temple for all the gods, and it resembles the Greek temple in the front, but in the back part is completely different. It is a central rotunda covered by a large dome linked to a rectangular vestibule. Actually, if we look to the building in the outside, it doesn't look that nice, because the most important thing is the inside. This is the spectacular inside. Here we have to face one of the questions: why would anybody do a dome for a building? The solution is in this image, because what we see is a massive internal space without any interruption, such as columns or pillars or walls, etc. As you may be seeing, the dome is divided into small squares, and there is a hole in the center, an oculus that is called, which gives a spectacular image, such as these ones. The one on the left hand side is during snow time in Rome, which is not very common. Imagine snowing in Valencia, it will be more or less the same. This is the outside of the dome. This is what I was telling you before. All the spectacular internal space is not reflected in the outside. It doesn't seem as spectacular as the inside. Among other things, the mathematical proportions of the building are remarkable. It is more or less a 40 diameter sphere, but it is a perfect sphere from the center of the oculus to the floor, and from one side of the building to another. This building has been respected throughout times because it was converted into a church. The next typology of buildings we are going to study in ancient Rome are the political buildings, and the most important one is the Curia, the meeting house for the Roman Senate. The Curia Julia still stands today, also because it was turned into a church. And one of the things that should strange us is that they are not sitting on a semicircle as we are used in our parliaments, but on rows confronting one to another. The next typology are economic buildings, are the basilicas, generally used for meetings, for trials, and for commercial activities. This is the Basilica of Maxentius in Rome, in the Fori Imperiali, and I want you to pay attention in this picture to something. This here in the bottom is a person. So imagine the massive size that we are talking about. Built with bricks, it is a huge internal space with a central nave with aisles at the sides, dividing the space for different sorts of activities. The name Basilica, as you may know, has been used for Christianity, for some religious buildings, and generally related with the adoption of this shape of this also meeting space. The next type of buildings are theaters, are for leisure activities, that is for spare time, for entertainment. These theaters are based on Greek theaters, as you may recall that we mentioned in previous unit, but the big difference is that they are not on slopes. We saw that Greek theaters were laid on the slope of hills and mountains because Greece is a very mountainous region, but Rome faced different challenges. For example, they built different theaters inside the city, and across the empire they had slopes and there were some flat areas. In this case, for example, what we see is that the stands are like half a stadium, and then we have the stands in the inside and a very large and ornate stage. This is the example of the theater of Palmyra in Syria that is famous because of the recent war that has happened over there. And you will probably know the Teatro Romano de Mérida in Extremadura. Again, these, among other differences, these very spectacular stages and backstages is a feature of Roman theaters.